My name's Tom King, and I'm the founder of Toolkit.law, and I'm so excited to be here with a 32-year legal mentor and friend of mine, the nationally known attorney in the United States and the former Harris County District Attorney in the state of Texas, Kim Ogg. Kim, it is great to see you again.
Thanks, Tom. Looking forward to this.
The point of our topic today is going to be human trafficking and sex trafficking. Um, Kim, you're known, at least in the United States. Um, you've run one of the biggest law firms in the country. You had how many prosecutors under you in one roof, under one roof?
375 out of a total of 900 total employees.
Incredible. And I believe you were the first to lead the gang task force in Harris County, if I remember, a long time ago.
When Houston began to see organized crime on a routine basis down at the street level, I was appointed by our mayor to lead the first anti gang task force in Houston, America's third biggest county of Harris and fourth biggest city.
That's right. And so for those of you who are Americans, you'll recognize Kim from many appearances on Fox News and other national media. She was recently at the center of some horrible violence of which she courageously led our community dealing with that. Let's go straight to our topic today, human trafficking and sex trafficking. So what I'm going to do for everybody is I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and we're going to go through the help sheet that you'll also be able to follow along with inside of toolkit.law. Kim, let's go ahead. You'll take the left column and I'll take the right column. What do you want to point out about when it comes to sex trafficking indicators?
We have to start early in terms of knowing what to look for. That means with our children, we need to be observant about changes in behavior. Sex trafficking doesn't know ages, legality, or sex. It's all about making money off human suffering. And so when we see changes in people as close to us as our own children and as young as 12, 11, 10, even younger at times, obviously, when there's a change in behavior, we need to know about it. If it happens to teenagers, you may see less explanation about their behavior, unexplained money, absences from school or work, even the community itself, someone dropping out of church or a civic association that they've participated in. And that change of behavior is worth checking out.
Kim, you just punched me in the gut when you just said human trafficking is profiting off human suffering. Oh my gosh, what an epiphany. I mean, that really just does come down to the utter depravity and evilness of this topic. Let's go ahead and carry on. So let's talk. Let's just keep going down the green boxes on your left column.
Well, we've talked about a change of behavior, but what should you look for specifically? A lot of trafficked individuals are moved between hotels, apartments, even Airbnbs, people's garage apartments, rental property. They may not know that the renter is really a third party making money off selling another human being for sex. And when that happens, it's not necessarily an indicator of guilt of the person who owns the residence or the place where the human trafficking is taking place. So it's good for those business individuals, people who own small businesses, to know what's happening in their places of business. And of course, if you see your child with hotel keys or unexplained receipts or simply not know where they're spending their days and nights, that's a big red flag for parents.
Additional cell phones, prepaid phones. Let's talk about the visible signs of abuse or chronic neglect.
You know, it's easy for kids to explain scratches, bruises as something that accidentally happened. But when we see repeated injuries or injuries to private parts or the face, sometimes that can have a different and much worse meaning. You mentioned those cell phones, burner phones, that kind of thing. They've got to communicate with the people who are controlling them. And those are big red flags, right along with chronic or visible signs of abuse.
Kim, if I'm going through the public and I see somebody at a mall, are there some signs or codes that some victims being controlled by somebody? Is there a universal code? On YouTube, I've seen something like, and I don't know if it's fake or not. Is there a universal code or hand language somebody can do behind their back to say, "Help me, I'm in distress"? Is there something that you can share with us? Are you aware of any of that?
There's nothing universal. I am aware of rescue groups that have provided hidden codes or methods for those who are captive in the sex trade to utilize. One example were simple Revlon lipsticks that had a barcode on them, and they were given out by an anti trafficking group in areas where there was a lot of trafficking happening. And it provided the people who were being trafficked a very subtle and non-disclosable way of getting information about where to get help.
Super. Let's go back to the help sheet. Lack of identifying documents or explanation for missing ID.
Well, in the world today, we have international communities everywhere, and it's quite common for people to not speak the language. It is uncommon for people to not know where they are, to not be sure of why they're there, and to lack basic identifying documents. That may be an indication that somebody else is holding those documents and, in a sense, holding those people captive by holding their identification captive. Those are also red flags. And we could see that in certain labor situations, different places that offer massage, different places that may offer something totally innocent, a nail salon, or perhaps even other types of day labor, um, housekeeping. And it can be that people are not just being trafficked for sex, but for labor.
Oh yeah, we always think of the most shocking aspect of it, but so you find okay, interesting. Okay, now what about rehearsed or scripted answers as we finish this column in the next minute?
You know, human traffickers often utilize people's family members and loved ones as a tool of oppression with the people they're trying to control. They tell them they will kill them if they don't, they will kill their loved ones or harm their loved ones if the victims don't do as they say, whether it's trafficking them for sex or trafficking them for labor. When you get a scripted answer, it almost sounds like one. They may not have any details behind the "I'm here to help my cousin" response, or "I'm just sending money to my family elsewhere." They may even panic when confronted by law enforcement, who doesn't just take a skin deep answer many times. So I think those are all good clues.
Last box you have on this column, disorientation or inability to describe.
When traffickers move people from covert location to covert location, they change cities. Sometimes they change states, and sometimes they traffic them internationally. When someone is confused about their location, I think that's an enormous indicator of a
Oh,
problem. I see this third party manager or the friend or the guardian that's with them as the biggest red flag. When a third party is answering where you are, what you're doing, and why you're there, that's a good clue that that person may be controlling a victim.
Fantastic. We're going to jump to the right column. We're going to jump to my column, and you're going to jump in and offer whatever comments you wish. But why reporting matters. And I actually have a very good friend who was from Colombia. That individual came here in middle school. In high school, Kim was kidnapped and taken for the next 4 years and was sex trafficked all over the country. And in fact, that individual, when FBI broke in, they mistook her as part of the gang, sent her to prison for 4 years. And throughout the whole time, they kept telling that individual, if you do something, we're going to go after your brother. And in fact, they then grabbed the younger brother for a period of time, but then gave him back. This was all to settle past stuff that happened in another country. Reporting does matter, and reporting to me is how uh, we all fine tune what we need to know for our plans of attack to deal with these insidious things. Of course, who can report? We can have anyone that can report it. Kim, when you look at reports, when someone is on the prosecutorial side, are there uh, surely you can use statistics when talking to a jury, right?
Yes, and I want to tell you that reporting is important, but following up on that report is doubly important because police and prosecutors miss clues just like the average uneducated person unless they've received training. And so sometimes the victim is re-victimized because we don't know that they're not part of the gang and because they're under threat or their family or loved one is in danger elsewhere, they don't say. And they get sometimes the same or even worse treatment than their traffickers. It's a great injustice. We seek to avoid that. And that's why following up, just because you report, having other people assist you and you following up is critical.
So let's talk about what to include in a report. So, regardless of the country you're in, if you're one of the 80 countries with English-based legal systems, we want evidence, right? And we work off reports to help us fine-tune what we prosecute. And I mean that more in the broad term of prosecutor, right? Because we can also sue people civilly for crimes that they do, right, Kim?
Right, we can. And there is a lot of liability for hotel owners, property owners, employers, people who claim they don't know in the face of evidence, which is what you're getting at. Evidence is facts. They are provable, that are provable. So they're generally considered, evidence is generally considered documents, photographs, videos, but giving a specific time, date, and place is how police gather evidence.
It's the roadmap for us to figure out what we can prosecute and maybe what we can convict on. So that's what to include in the report. Let's talk about reporting in emergencies. If someone is in immediate danger, such as a minor being taken away, a victim being assaulted, or someone being transported forcefully, always prioritize those emergency services so that you can intervene safely, observe, and report discreetly. Next, what are the legal obligations of professionals? It's going to obviously vary amongst our 80 countries of our Toolkit.law members, right? But
Of course.
we have legal obligations in many countries. Certain professions are mandatory. Judges, mediators. I once had a mediation where something came out, had to stop the mediation, discontinue do an impasse, and immediately report to CPS. Even though normally in many countries, if not all, mediation is a confidential process unless you uncover criminal liability, right? And so in that
Right.
case, I had to come up with that. Your thoughts, Kim?
That oftentimes minors and the age of a victim can trigger legally required reporting. That's not just in the United States, that's in a number of countries. So when you're dealing with children, there's always a greater responsibility because they're more helpless as victims.
Jumping on to challenges and barriers to reporting. Obviously, people can be afraid of retaliation, the stigma of reporting, maybe especially if you didn't report it right away and you delayed it. And then you thinking, do I report it now? Or are people going to point the finger at me because I allowed something like I allowed my boyfriend who's living with us to stay here for 2 extra years before I did anything. But legal professionals can support trauma informed and culturally offensive reporting, especially where gender inequality, migration status, caste, or class discrimination can be effective or can affect the access to justice. We have about 1 minute left on this column. So let's talk about anonymous and confidential reporting options. Of course, there are going to be what in many countries we call hotlines and websites. Some will be international, some will be for a continent, such as a European or Middle Eastern or North American resources. They may be countrywide or they may be down to your jurisdiction, which may be a province, a state, or a region. Certainly, we have a number of those here. This is especially important to countries where traffickers may be linked to law enforcement or political actors.
Yes.
I remember going to Mexico a year ago and I was getting the services of a medical professional there. And I said, how come they haven't attacked you? And Kim, you're going to know what I'm talking about. Over at Piedras Negras, right across the border from Eagle Pass. And he said, well, two things. Number one, the cartels don't attack doctors because someday they may need one. But the other thing is, the police are sure to let us know as long as we don't interfere with the police, because the police are officially the cartel in that state in Mexico. They stay in their lane, we stay in ours, right? So what happens when the cartel is the police, right?
Turn to the private sector. There are always going to be nonprofit groups around this world that care about people who are crime victims of human trafficking. Use them. You can look them up on your phone anywhere. And I'd encourage people, get out of this life any way you can. It ends badly for crime victims, and it's always about the profiteering of those who don't mind sacrificing other people for their own greed.
So, lastly, reporting through non-governmental organizations or international partners. I think this builds right on what you were just saying, Kim, that there are some resources that are international or national, and we should be pay attention to those. We're going to jump back now as we're halfway through, halfway to go. We're going to jump on column 3 on page 2 of the Toolkit.law seminar on human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking. Kim, walk us down the left side of this help sheet.
Well, in talking about who's keeping track of all of these human traffickers and the victims, and who's air traffic controlling, if you will, where victims should go, Polaris runs the United States National Human Trafficking Hotline, and they work with private and public partners across North America to actually dismantle trafficking networks. Survivor informed data, people who've been used in the business, crime victims, provide the most detailed and best information to Polaris. And in working with law enforcement, I can tell you it's a priority for law enforcement, especially where children are concerned.
Okay. Now, what about the Canadian Center to End Human Trafficking? That's obviously specific to one country, but that's just another great example of resources that are available.
Yes, Canada's been ahead of the game in trying to stop human trafficking, and they've got a 24/7 multilingual hotline. But I would remind people that these exist in many countries as the world has become aware that human trafficking is a scourge and that it shows no discrimination toward international boundaries or human beings. We've gotten together in law enforcement and the private sector, and there's more resources available to try and abolish slavery, what is called modern day slavery, which is human trafficking.
So I see here about the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. This is obviously a U.S. organization.
It is, and it mentions U visas, which are known in our country as extensions to a typical green card or even somebody who is undocumented. U visas are reserved for crime victims that are cooperating with law enforcement. There's a very limited number available, but you have to report the crime to become eligible for a U visa in America.
Okay. ECPAT. I'm not familiar with this.
Well, the United States branch of the International Child Protection Network focuses on eliminating the commercial sexual exploitation of kids. And they're a training group that helps police, educators, and healthcare providers recognize victims more easily because many times they can't or won't volunteer that information for all the reasons we've discussed.
Okay. I see more organizations you have here that are US, Canada, Mexico. These seem to be North American focused.
Truckers are, unfortunately, they've been an essential part of promoting the sex trade industry because many think of prostitution as something that is much more innocent than it is in reality. Men often participate in prostitution and don't realize they're contributing like they are to exploitation of children and other victims who are being forced into sex against their will for money. So, Truckers Against Trafficking is a group trying to stop that. And they're trying to inform truckers about the damage they do. And then in return, get information about who's trafficking where. They're very useful. The Alianza Nacional is another example. And I
Okay.
think you're going to find similar groups willing to help with 1-800 numbers in many countries around the world.
Kim, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think of one case that involved you that was sort of an epiphany to you? You know, many times prosecutors will have those three or five cases that change them profoundly, right? And your trial track record was just nationally in the United States just extraordinary, and the breadth of your experience. Can you think of one or two scenarios or cases that really opened your eyes more than you would have expected, even given all your experience?
One night we received a phone call from police. This is a good 20 years ago. I was running Crime Stoppers, which was an internationally known crime tips hotline, as we've been discussing.
Back when you were 25. Yeah, I remember.
And we got a call that there were 90 people nude in a boarded up house, who some of whom had escaped and simply run through the neighborhood asking for help. They were being starved, their loved ones were being extorted, and nearly every one of them had been sexually assaulted by the individuals who brought them across the border and here. This was not typical human trafficking, and they had not yet been harnessed into specific brothels. It was more uh, a mass victimization, but they were all headed toward different types of human trafficking, not organizations, but places where certain organized crime groups ran either a prostitution ring, a theft ring, a labor ring, and the different victims were sorted by their various uh, abilities. Men were used in forced types of labor and prostitution. Women were forced to steal, and all of these people were ultimately going to be moved around the country. Once I realized the scope of that operation, I really woke up to what impact trafficking was having in our country. That was in our country 20 years ago. I think there are probably people watching this video who recognized it was going on in their geographic location decades ago.
And you know what? Those evil businessmen are probably in the top 3% of ability as great businessmen or women, right? They're
Well, on
they're
the
evil.
black
They're
market,
evil. They're
yes,
evil, but
they're
also
the CEOs of the black market.
that's right. And they're thinking ahead of ways that you're trying to stop them, right?
Absolutely. And they're better armed many times than law enforcement. So organized crime can actually be organized, and it's all designed for profitability.
Oh my stars, man! Wow, what the what a tough topic. Okay, continuing on, let's look at the last column. So these are just more sex trafficking global organizations. Kim had the column on the left that were more North American focused, but there are other organizations. And Kim, if you know of any of these, jump in. There's the International Justice Mission. You'll see the web address there. It's a global human rights organization that works in over 20 countries to rescue survivors. There's A21 campaign with offices in 14 countries, and they offer crisis hotlines, safe houses, victim advocacy programs as we use our last 4 minutes. Anti-Slavery International, based in the United Kingdom with a global reach. They apparently are the world's oldest human rights organization, active since 1839, and it's the focus on modern slavery, including sex trafficking of women and girls. They work across Africa, Asia, and Europe to push systematic reform. Hope for Justice, which is all in a number of different places, and in Northern Europe, in Africa, in Southeastern Asia, La Estrada International, European and Central Asian, the Hagar Institute in Southeast Asia, and then the United States Office on Drugs and Crime. And certainly, if there's an entity that's going to be global that maybe may be able to reach out to, it would be the United Nations. Kim, we have about 2 or 3 minutes left. If if this were being watched by young girls or young boys in middle school or high school, if they were close to bad actors and they don't realize how close they are to something that is utterly life changing and life destroying, do you have any thoughts as one of North America's greatest district attorneys, most visible? What would you say to children or young adults who are close to getting caught up into that and don't realize how close they are to getting burned by fire?
Don't be fooled, is what I would tell people of all ages, starting with small children, going through your teenage years into young adulthood, and even into middle age. Money is always, always involved in human trafficking. And when any third person seeks to make money off you, whether they're your boyfriend, whether they're your employer or your mentor or your next door neighbor or even your family member, understand that that money is blood money and it's your blood. Don't be lured into doing things that make other people, especially adults, money. That's not love, that's greed on their part. Sometimes when organizations go to rescue young people, they think they're in love with their trafficker. They think that they're showing and that this is an appropriate way to show their feelings for someone. It's not. If somebody's making money off you, that's trafficking. And sex is not to be sold. Your body is not property. And I would tell kids, you're worth a lot more than any money anybody could offer you to have sex with another person and then give them the money.
We have
Don't
one
do it.
we have 1 minute left. What would be your message to legal professionals around the world?
Fellow lawyers and justice seekers, Open your eyes. Human trafficking is happening all around us. It's a matter of observing, knowing what clues to look for, and what to do when you see it. Remember, even if we don't have professional liability, we can't be sued or we can't go to jail based on what we fail to do. We have an ethical responsibility to be honorable professionals. Let's better this world. Let's stop human trafficking now.
Kim, thank you so much. It's always so great to do anything with you. It's so self-serving for me. I just love the heck out of you professionally and as a great friend, but also what a blessing you are to our country. So this concludes our 30-minute continuing legal education seminar on human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking. And if you'd like to find out more about Kim Ogg, you can see her web address in the top left corner, kim-ogg.com. Thank you, and this concludes this presentation.